Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Wind Down Wednesday. Today is, oh my goodness, today is the final day of January. Today is Wednesday, January 31st. This is wonderful. We are so excited to be joining y'all tonight. So grab whatever you need to get comfy and cozy, and we'll see you back here in about 30 seconds. All right. Hello, everyone. Good evening. I'm so excited to be with y'all today. And I get to hang out with Michele. Michele, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I am really excited though, Michele, because I feel like January is one of those months that has 150 days in it.
It's finally almost over.
Yes. So if tomorrow is February 1st, right? Tomorrow's Thursday, February 1st. I'm like, this is glorious. Like a new month. It brings us closer to spring. I'm very happy.
I feel like maybe February is one of your favorites. You got like hearts, love, theme, right?
Yes, all the pink.
Other than October, it's the other pink month, right?
Yes, that's right.
So you must be very excited.
I am so thrilled. And I want to share, we've got a couple of really great announcements to share with everybody. The IRC job fair is happening on March 9th and registration's now open. So if you are somebody who is looking to make a shift in what district you are in, or if you're like a classroom teacher, librarian specialist, tech coach, or whatever, and you have that ESL endorsement and you're like, hey, I'm ready to make this change and leap into the multilingual ed space, this is a great opportunity for you if you are a job seeker. And also on the flip side of that, if you're a district that's looking to fill your whole staff and get everyone locked in, do it now, do it early, because us multilingual educators, EL, bilingual, dual language, that's a hard position to fill sometimes. So you gotta strike early.
I feel like we always hear from administrators, that putting the program in place that they really want is really reliant on the staff that they're able to find sometimes. So
yes, absolutely,
it's critical. Get in there.
So make sure you get registered for that. If you are a job seeker, it's free to register. It's free to attend. You'll upload like a resume or something like that to the event platform. But if you are a district, there's a fee for that. But you'll get first dibs on all these great people. So check that out. All the information and registration is on the IRC website. So we want you to know about that. Another great announcement, we always talk about this, is the Family and BPAC Information Series. These are free. These are virtual. These are offered at multiple times during the day. They're in English and in Spanish. And all of this next series is tied to students with IEPs. So this is a big topic. And I know districts are and teachers are hungry for resources to equip like their families. So this is a great series. Definitely encourage y'all to check it out. And then we can't say what this is, you guys. We can't say quite yet, but we have a big announcement coming tomorrow on February 1st. We want you to be following us on social media. So at Illinois Resource Center, check us out, LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, we're everywhere. Make sure you're following us because that comes tomorrow. And I'm really excited about that announcement.
I'm excited too.
Oh, that's going to be fun. All right. So I think those are all of our announcements. And then at the end of our time together, we're going to share kind of like one additional opportunity based on what we're talking about today. So we'll share that in just a little bit. But tonight's topic is talking about supporting our LTELs / experienced multilinguals. So LTEL is long-term English learner. And it sounds like most districts are kind of taking on like the definition of that as students who have been in our programming for 5 or 6 or more years. So they've been receiving these supports for like language supports for 5, 6 years and beyond. And they still have not reached, right, that exit criteria to exit the program. So that's tonight's topic. And I know this is a hot topic. But even like the terminology, I think has started to shift a little bit. Have you noticed that too, Michele?
Yeah, I have noticed that. And some people are definitely using the term experienced multilinguals. And I think if we think about that, it's really representative of how long they've been on their language learning journey and all the rich language learning experiences or backgrounds that they might come from. Yeah. So in a lot of ways, I like that term for that reason.
Yes. It's kind of honoring, right? Like honoring their journeys instead of saying like, I don't know, long term, I feel like sometimes sounds kind of negative, like
a lifer or.
Yes, I've heard that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I'm like, gosh, if I think of anything that I do, anything that I'm learning and working on, like I'm a long-term everything learner. Like,
yeah, you don't want it to necessarily be a negative.
Yes, exactly.
But at the same time, you want to ask yourself, are students reaching like a plateau at some point in our district where we're then not seeing growth, and maybe we target students at that level, or we try to get to the heart of or the root cause of that plateau. Yes. I think some people don't realize that, we put a lot of emphasis on newcomers.
Yes.
I always get the question like over and over and over, how can I help support newcomers? And this is important work.
Yes.
That's important work. But the most complex part of the language learning journey for our students, the most complex part really happens after that moment.
Yes.
Yes. At the upper levels of language development, there's a lot more to learn to advance to the next level.
Yes. And I appreciate so much that you said that, because again, like teachers are like, oh, I got to flood supports for the newcomer students. Yeah. And you're like, yes, we love the intentionality about, planning for instruction and making things comprehensible and accessible to students at the beginning of their language journey. But the academic language demand as you grow in your proficiency, that's like pretty significant. And if teachers and our colleagues and teammates are just thinking about the newcomer lens and focusing all their energy there, we're really missing opportunities to linguistically support students at higher proficiency levels. And some of our teachers are like, oh, no, Carly, that kid is fine because they can read the textbook. That kid is fine because, they're talking in group work. But I'm like, is fine? Is that what we want?
Right. And also, are we really listening and analyzing the type of talk that they're doing? How are they participating? Because I think sometimes they're still participating using those everyday vocabulary words, maybe specific vocabulary words, but we're not really getting into technical or precise, content related words. We're also maybe not getting into complexity of sentences. And that all needs to be explicitly taught and supported. Multiple words. Yep. Even collocations, which is one of like the last things, right? Where we teach and provide opportunities to correct things like, if I wrote, the character passed the pepper and salt, well, it's salt and pepper. When do we learn to fine tune? Some of that is a matter of time. Yeah. But with explicit support, we don't get students reaching that plateau.
Exactly. And again, like that example of the collocations, right? Salt and pepper instead of pepper and salt and pepper. Like these are things like, and some of us, if we're kind of thinking about this, like when was I taught that? Like, was I, was there a moment or was it just one of those things that I've always heard, so I just absorbed, you know what I mean? Like I just absorbed it almost,
Right.
and I just kind of took on that language pattern and like never questioned it. Even like the order of adjectives in English, like there is a specific order, like when you say color, when you say the number, the
Right.
quantity, when you say, you know, this or that. So it's interesting to think about kind of the scope and the expectation at higher proficiency levels. And if we're just kind of assuming like, oh no, they're fine because they can read, they're fine because they are talking, like
Right.
we really do need to be mindful and intentional about the supports at those levels. So I love that.
Yeah, when I'm thinking about students at like maybe level 3 that are moving or need to move to level
Yeah.
4, I'm starting to think about teachers needing to be intentional with sentence frames that they provide as well. Because it's not just a sentence frame that you want to provide so that somebody starts to talk. We know that students who have been in programs a long time can communicate and talk. But for me, it's about thinking carefully about how you're elevating the talk that they do. So I sometimes give the example of if you're working with students and you're going to ask them simple questions when they're coming in from the weekend. Hey, did you guys go out in the snow? What did you wear? If you're in middle school, maybe they just wore a hoodie. If you're in upper intermediate grades, maybe they did put on other things. But are you asking them to answer using a complete sentence? Are we asking them to not just say I wore, but maybe something like I sported a, and that can help teach those multiple meaning words.
Yeah.
So I'm always trying to think of like, is there another lesser used way to say this that I can help push students to be able to reach and learn those multiple meaning words in those more complex sentence
Yes.
structures?
Yes. And I love that, the stems and the frames. And I think, like, again, sometimes we hear that like as a scaffold and we're like, oh, that's great for newcomer students, or that's great for students at the beginning levels of their language journey. But that's so, so good because it's not just a scaffold. It's also like a stretcher, right? Like it's a way to like build in more opportunities for languaging, and like enrich more vocabulary and stretch out different variations of how to say something. So this is good for monolingual kids too, right? You're like, I always joke and say, like, if we were to have our monolingual kids take an access test, like where would they fall? Like they would probably fall somewhere like 3, 4, 5-ish. I would too, depending on topic.
Those upper levels of academic language support help all, definitely, so help all, but are critical for students to be able to move forward in their language. So if we're asking them to talk about the food chain or a habitat, and we're saying who eats whom, we want to think about if they're going to say something like the wolf eats the rabbit, can we push to the blank consumes blank rather than just eats? Like, these are the things I think vocabulary wise that will continue to push. I like to think about if there's a strategy out there for that. Picture word induction model is one of my favorites for like pushing. Are you familiar with this? Yeah, we show students a photo of something happening. We ask first for the labeling of nouns, so that we get everyday vocabulary, but then we can push for technical vocabulary when we're labeling or relabeling as a class, sharing with each other what the labels are and learning and relabeling. We can then extend to sentences by adding a verb. And then I like to take those basic sentences and try to ask students to work to elevate and elongate those. So we have like rich sentences related to content. Later, we can move that into a paragraph if we wanted to build on discourse. But I like picture word induction model. There's so much online for it too. If teachers wanted to even search PWIM picture word induction model, I feel like a lot would come up.
Yes, that's a great thing to Google. That's a great, like, I think that's also a great structure because it is very linguistically inclusive of all proficiency levels. It feels good to monolingual kids, multilingual kids, because again, everyone's stretching in language, and the images can be anything. It could be something tied to like, an image from your content, like your resource, that you're using, your curriculum. Or it can be something like, I always love those National Geographic, or what are they, like the nationwide, like photographer, like wildlife photography that are funny. They always release awards for that. And I love those because they're funny. They're so funny.
Yes,
So
we could
it's really good to know, like, they could use those.
so many things. I've got some, I just recently was working on using some photos in an ELA class, and we were using like Star Wars for character, for like character change. We were using Anakin, and just labeling with words and descriptions the types of like character traits that we were seeing in several different scenes. We were like, I was trying to activate their thinking, like using things that they might like. So we were talking also about protagonist and antagonist. But first, they labeled it with like the names of the characters, and then good guy, bad guy, and then we were stretching to protagonist, antagonist, and thinking about those traits, and then relating it back to text. But
that's awesome.
Like those choices are really important for our long-term ELs too.
Yes, absolutely. Now, when you think about long-term ELs and who comes to you, Michele, like when a teacher or a leader comes to you and says, like, I need help for my LTELs, can you present to my secondary staff or my junior high? Do you think like that's kind of like the only target audience that we should be having this conversation with?
No. No, I don't think so, because we really want to think about the whole process in our programs, in our general education curriculum and our specialized programs, where we think about not only supporting students once they've been in programs a long while and have reached or have been at that plateau for some time, but also like how do we avoid having that plateau? So I think early intervention there is important as well. For me also, I always want to go back and think about what does the literacy learning or teaching look like all along the way? And what does it look like for students who might struggle to read in English? What does it look like for them at young grades, at middle grades, at upper grades? Because a lot of times what I see, I don't know if do you see this too, Carly, is when I might go in to help at a middle school or a high school, I kind of see like one or the other thing. They're either still working on like the crux of English, the phonics, the phonemic awareness. They're saying it must be decoding, and like continuing to work in maybe boxed or purchased interventions. Or they're utilizing grade level text, but then using strategies to help students succeed answering questions and things like using audio tools so students can listen to reading and things like that. And I feel like sometimes there's like that critical middle part where like when do they get practice growing their reading with a variety of leveled materials.
Yes. It's like that blend.
Like succeeding the moment, kind of listening to other people read rigorous text, and how do we move them into being able to read that rigorous text?
Yes, absolutely. It is. It's interesting because like I like the way that you captured that, because I do see that like that separate. It's almost like we offer this or we offer this. It's never like blue, 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 blue. Like there should be like kind of some fluidity, so that students are kind of getting everything, a good balance.
Yeah, so like how about we go back to utilizing some picture books with students and having them have picture books to read. There are phenomenal picture books that are for older learners that tie to the content, would give opportunities with robust vocabulary but still have a lot of visual support. And then also thinking about engineering or scaffolding text that is closer to grade level, but also providing a variety of level texts that are somewhere in the zone of proximal development for that student, but on the content, so they can still participate in talk, participate in the learning of the Common Core standards that they're trying to meet, the other Common Core standards, not just number 10. And like just continuing to work on moving up in their reading, daily opportunities for them to independently practice reading with support.
Absolutely. I think you hit on a lot of different things, because it's having the conversation not just with secondary and not just with middle school. It's looking programmatically right across the whole spectrum of our learning experiences, and how we are providing instruction and support along their way, like for literacy instruction and for language instruction and support. And what does that look like from in this grade level cluster, and as students grow, how are we as a program creating opportunities for students to grow in their literacy journeys and in their languaging journeys? Like, I think that's so critical, because I love the phrase that you use, like the prevention, right? It's the prevention piece, because we don't want our students to kind of plateau in any domain.
And sometimes I feel like that plateau starts to sneak in earlier than we might suspect. Like right at the first, second grade level, when we see text moving a lot from visually supported to print only, students may start to learn strategies for succeeding the moment, listening to what's said, and being able to like keep with it, but maybe not at the highest level, and not really taking ownership of independence with literacy skill yet.
Yes. It's like that shift, right? Like learning to read and then reading to learn. Like those years are really critical. Like all the years are critical, but that's like a big shift. So yeah, absolutely. So we do need to have these conversations with everybody in our program. It does really need to start. And then we could even kind of get into the nitty gritty and say, like, what does our LTEL or our experienced multilingual population look like? Like, what have their experiences been? And then we could say, like, let's go ahead and now work backwards and say, how are we enhancing all of these opportunities across grade levels so that we're being intentional. And then the other piece, because I know we've said the word plateau a few times, is we're looking at, at language data, we're looking at, assessment data, we're looking at benchmarking data, we're looking at anecdotal data, we're taking all of this in, so that, like, it's not just one piece that's kind of carrying everything. But we also know, like, our access data, that's really important, especially in terms of like eligibility for students and reclassification to, like, kind of exit the program. So do we have moments throughout the year where we're all coming together and looking at language data and language growth by domain from year to year? I always say, like, WIDA gives us those, it's like the access interpretive guide for, like,
For speaking.
Yes. So I think that is a great tool. I think teachers and teams should, like, look at that together every single year, so that we know the difference between the scale score and the proficiency level score, and we can track growth from year to year, looking at the scale score at each domain, and then say, student by student, are there certain domains that we really need to beef up? We need to provide more opportunities. And we can look at trends in grade levels. We can look at trends as a program and say, all right, where do we really need to provide some, more intentional support at a program level?
And sometimes it is not going to fall in the vocabulary. We talked about words and building up the levels of vocabulary, but I think a lot of times we might be looking at stretching and elongating sentences that is causing a challenge. And then also the overall discourse that could be. So I always like to think that, like, yes, we have that set of data, but we also want to have a set of educators who can analyze classroom data, like writing samples, exit tickets, the way students are answering questions, I like to kind of think about color coding, like look for words that they've used, like what stands out. Let's look for sentence structure, what stands out. Let's look at overall discourse, clarity, organization, the types of the length that you would expect at the grade level. And then we can look like, well, hey, it looks like many of our students are struggling with length or discourse. And then if we know that, if we can analyze that, then we can target that for growth. And then there's one more piece of data that I feel like is often overlooked and not even collected at all. And this I feel is very critical for long-term ELs. The piece of data I think that is not often collected is the mindset of the staff as related to our students who are classified as multilingual learners. Because I think the mindset that we have about how they can grow and do their best and whose job that is important. I also think that we sometimes blame learners for not growing or exiting and the way that we blame them is not by saying like it's all your fault, but by saying phrases or we have a community that might say things like, how do I get them motivated?
Yes.
Like those are all related to the mindset that we have, the belief we have in the students that they can succeed and continue to thrive in our academic setting.
I 1,000% agree. I think the mindset is huge and very much overlooked. And the phrases we use to describe students who have been identified as like an LTEL or an experienced multilingual, like I have heard so many times, well, they're just not motivated. They're just not engaged. They. And then like we can say like, again, looking at a school-wide, like just a temperature check of like, does everyone know that this is everyone's job? Like this is everyone's professional responsibility to support language growth and development. Like no matter what your role is, like if you're the social worker, the psych, the biology teacher, the second grade classroom teacher, it is like we're all supporting language growth and development. And I also say this, that access data and the language data that we collect, that is school-wide data. That's not the EL teachers' data. That's not the multilingual students' data. That is school data because it's showing how we're, it's like that temperature check of how each individual is doing in their language journey, provided by the support, like from the school, from like overall, because it's not just like I'm only getting language support when I'm with my EL teacher. It's everywhere.
So that piece of working together and then celebrating together our students, and also the mindset that we have about how we celebrate whatever pathway, learning journey, curve they're on with their home language as well, all plays into the mindset of support for our students. And
absolutely.
And language learning is a long journey.
Yes.
How are we supporting? I feel like if it's a mountain, right? It's like, man, they've gotten so far. Like imagine all the steps that they've taken to succeed in the new language. And then right when Mount Everest is there, like that's when we rip out all the harnesses and like say, okay, cool, you're on your own. There's the top. So I feel like if we can just like add more supports, like push from the back, you got it. Yeah. Like it will make a better overall journey and prevent us from having students who might feel like they are going to give up in school in general. So
yes. And I think that educator mindset and the school staff culture and climate mindset, right, of who our students are and what they can do and whose job it is, I think that does definitely play an impact on how students see themselves as languagers, because it can feel very defeating and deflating if I'm a student and I've always been in this program for years and years and I've always had to take this test, and every year like I just can't get there. Like I can't get there. And then it starts to like play, on how I see myself as a languager. Like, oh, I guess I'm not good at that, or I guess I'm, it tells me I'm still doing it wrong, or I'm not good enough yet. So the conversations we have with our students or about our students when they're not in the room, that all matters. That all plays a big role.
Yeah, we all know whether it's positive or negative, that becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy,
Yes, absolutely.
So let it be positive.
Yes, absolutely. So, Michele, we've been chatting for about 30 minutes this evening, and I am so excited because we haven't made this like formal announcement quite yet, but we are so pumped. Michele and I are going to be hosting a full day in-person workshop at our office at the IRC in Arlington Heights on serving and supporting this student group, this long-term English learner / experienced multilinguals. And we're going to have so much fun. I cannot wait. Registration is now open. It's free to register. Like, you can come on, hang with us.
This is awesome. And I'm excited because I think we're going to be not only talking about these things more, but also giving really good hands-on practical ways that teachers can impact positively the lives of all of their multilinguals, and definitely students who are classified as long-term ELs or experienced multilinguals. So you want to see picture word induction model, come to the session. You want to know different entry points and how to support at the top, come to the session. You want to see examples of the types of reading that will meet the needs of long-term ELs, come to the session. We've got lots of goodies, and it's going to be fun.
It's going to be so much fun. So thank y'all so much for hanging out with us tonight. We hope to see you in person with us. Like, we'll have so much fun. It'll be so much fun. We'll have lots of laughs, lots of good content, lots of good takeaways that you could be like, all right, I'm sharing this with my team tomorrow. That's like my favorite type of workshop, right? Like when you can bring some tools back to your team. So we're excited for that. So thank y'all so much for hanging out with us tonight. And hopefully we'll see you guys all next month. Michele, thanks so much for hanging with me.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. See you soon.